Hey, it is Gigacast, technically episode 12 for March 11th. We have a really special guest today. And how's it going, Tony?
Good. Congratulations, 2018 V-Expert.
You know, I was like just waiting and sitting around all day Friday.
I know.
Like, what the heck? When is this thing going to come out?
I know they're busy.
All of my licenses in my lab are going to expire.
Yep.
And I'm just like, what, and then finally the email came and I'm like, oh, thank you, Corey.
I know those guys are busy. I know they're swamped. I felt real bad about it, but man, I was checking my email. It felt like every 30 seconds.
So there's a third person laughing in the background.
Yep.
Introduce yourself, Mr. Chris Williams.
Hi, everybody. Hello, Internet world. This is Chris Williams. I am very honored to be on the Gigacast today.
Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
It's also another special today because it's daylight savings, where we're all extra tired today.
I've had my third cup of coffee, and I'm good to go.
My whole family is literally upstairs napping right now.
My wife is downstairs napping.
Yeah.
I would be napping if I wasn't doing this.
Yeah. Just like, come on, man. Not a fan. Okay, so a lot has happened in the last week.
Mm-hmm.
Mostly centered around VExpert stuff. I got my second time around, so I'm really happy about that.
Congratulations.
Now I'm just waiting for them to open up the NSX VExpert.
Yep, that'll happen midway when they open up the second round.
And then going to that. Chris, do you not get into the VMware stuff so much anymore since you're so AWS focused? Or
No, absolutely not. I'm doing a lot of talks on vSphere on AWS, the new AWS offering.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a VCIX too, so my company, Green Pages Enterprises, always uses me for gigs and engagements and talking. I mean, I'm still very much 1 foot planted in the VMware world and 1 foot planted in AWS. I don't distinguish, and I personally, as an architect, I believe that having the widest range of tools in your tool belt makes you design the best solution. So,
cool.
So I'm never gonna throw the baby out with the bathwater when it comes to technology.
Cool. Yeah. Okay. We've already run out of things to talk about.
Was that the right answer? Was that
That's the end of the episode.
Good.
Thank you for joining, everybody.
And we're good.
Your audio kind of like dropped off a cliff there suddenly, Chris. So I don't know what happened, but
did it? Oh, ruh-roh.
Yeah, I can sort of hear you, but
I'll stop moving.
Yeah, it's. I think it's a little better now, but we'll keep an eye on that. We're also, I should mention, for people listening to the traditional audio format only, we are doing things a little bit differently today. We are connected, instead of through Skype, we're connected through Zoom. And I'm also recording video of us talking in case people actually want to see what we look like for some strange reason.
Can't imagine why.
So we're going to just play with this format and see if there's actually value to publishing out the video.
If our followers drop precipitously after this, we know never do video again.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if there's technical difficulties today, I'm just going to blame it on that. So, all right. Starting off our AWS talk. So, as I mentioned in the pre-roll, Chris, I started my company in earnest in 2017, and I had the goal right away because I didn't have a whole lot of work to just sit and study for the AWS Solutions Architect Associate exam.
Yep.
And I bought the Udemy series from A Cloud Guru, Ryan Kroonenberg, who's probably the coolest Aussie out there.
Absolutely.
And I, started watching some of the stuff, and I went through a little bit of it, and then I just got sidetracked and never went back to it. So
guilty here as well.
How, what I've always been sort of curious about, because the stuff that he goes through, in at least the early parts of the course, it's kind of all just really like, this is what this is, this is what that is. Is
Yep.
that really all the exam consists of? Is just kind of making sure you know and understand what all those little pieces of AWS are? Or is it really more like a other technical Microsoft or VMware exam where they actually get into the meat and bones of technical stuff?
So the associate exams and the professional exams are two entirely different beasts. The associate exams. So I know exactly which videos you're talking about. You're talking about the 10,000 foot view, the four videos back to back of like all of the services in rapid fire succession.
Yeah.
And that's just the tip of the iceberg. For the associate exams, what they do is they do want you. Obviously, you have to know what the services that are listed in the exam are, but you also have to know what they do, and you have to know how they interact with each other.
Okay.
And you also have to know like how to build a VPC from scratch, how to install, connect an internet gateway to an environment, what to do in the event of a NAT instance. If you have a NAT instance, what are the rules that you have to put in place on your public facing subnet in order for it to be able to be a NAT, things like that. The professional exam is far more involved.
Okay.
You not only do you have to know all of that stuff, but you also have to know the things that the services cannot do. So a lot of the questions will be four or five very similarly worded questions, but then one thing will have at a 4 kilobit chunk versus a 24 kilobit chunk, and you have to know that service doesn't have tokenization at a 24 kilobit chunk. It's super granular.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's in order to pass the associate exam, I basically watched the entire A Cloud Guru series. I watched the dev, the essay, and the sysops, and then I took essay, and then I took dev.
Okay.
And that was enough, along with the white papers prescribed in the blueprint. For the pro exam, I watched the A Cloud Guru pro exam and took the prep test for it. Went in, took the test, failed it miserably. Not miserably, I got like a 60 on it. Then I went back and studied for another 6 months, and so for the pro, Linux Academy was the way to go for me. For my brain, the Linux Academy videos were amazing, super good. I did a big write up in my blog about how to pass them and everything. Not how to pass them, but what I studied that helped me pass them.
Yeah.
And Linux Academy for the pro essay for me was gold, and that really helped out a lot.
I'm not familiar with Linux Academy. Is that just another training site of some sort?
Yeah. So linuxacademy.com is they are between. I would argue that those two are the two top premier AWS and Linux learning sites. Linux Academy has some really good Python classes and some really good AWS classes. Some Jenkins. I mean, they're very much Linux oriented. Why are you snickering?
I started taking notes and Tony didn't do it at the same time.
The exact same note on the same point.
And so they much have a decidedly Linux bent to it, obviously because the name is Linux Academy, and A Cloud Guru is much more angled at AWS. What's interesting is that as both products have matured, so I have a subscription to both now. As both products have matured, they are now kind of dipping their toes into the same pools of each other. So Linux Academy started with Linux, and then it went to AWS. A Cloud Guru started on AWS, and now they're going towards Linux. Now they both have two really good classes on Python. They're both doing Azure now. They're good. They're both good in different ways, and I, in having both subscriptions, I can actually you get some things out of both of them.
Cool.
So, as in terms of the format of the exam, so it's multiple choice, I assume, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then is it one of these things like, the old Microsoft exams used to be like up to 4 choices.
Yeah.
And then when I did my Exchange 2010 exam, it was like instead of A through D, it was A through K for your options. So do they do that where they give you like 15 choices?
They give you as sometimes it's four. I saw 2 questions that were actually true or false. Some of the questions were, the standard 4, but it's always pick as many as are relevant. So it's not pick the one that you need. It's pick whichever ones are right. So it could be
pick 3 or whatever.
All of them, exactly.
Yeah.
And if you miss one, you've missed it.
So they don't give you partial credit.
I can't speak to that. I don't know if they give you partial credit or not.
I think most of them don't.
Yeah, if you miss them, part of it.
It was
one, you miss them all.
Fairly brutal. I wrote, so I actually have I have 1 article on passing the SA Associate, and then I have a total of 9 articles on passing the SA Pro, which included my notes and my first failure and my lessons learned from my first failure, and then my second go and what I learned from that and how I eventually succeeded with it.
So on the pro exams, is it still just multiple choice, or do they actually do some live stuff?
No, just multiple choice. Okay. There's no labbing.
Man, I really like the lab exam. After doing the VCIX, I'm just like, I need to do more of these.
I did too until I took the VCAP 6 DCA. Oh, that thing was so tough. It was the exam was broken. I love the VCAP 5 DCA, but the VCAP 6 DCA broke my spirit.
Yeah, like when I was reading, other people's experiences on the VCIX NV before I took it, there was a lot of initial complaints about lag in the environment.
Uh-huh.
And they said if you were like overseas in Europe, it was especially bad. So they would actually give those people an extra half an hour.
Nice.
Really?
Yeah. But like when I did it, I had to do it 3 times, and I never had really any lag problems. But the VMworld experience was probably the best when I actually passed it there.
I have to. So I'm taking my VCP-NV shortly, and then the theory is that I will be taking the VCIX-NV in the future as well.
Yeah, well, they kind of switched that up a little bit, because when it first came out, when I did it, you had to have the VCP-NV, and then you could go directly to the VCIX-NV, because they didn't have, and this was when they were kind of restructuring the VCAP exams.
Yeah.
And so now, at least according to the VMware site, what last I saw, in order to get the VCIX-NV, you had to pass 2 VCAP-NV exams. There's a design and a deploy.
Oh, so there is 2 VCAPs for the NV now.
Well, as of this point, I think there's still only 1. I don't think they've finished the other one yet.
Oh, I better hurry then.
Grandfathered in.
Yeah.
Get it in there.
And so and that's why when I first got the VCP-NV, and I looked at the track to get the VCIX, I'm just like, all right, all I really have to do is just sit this exam and get it, because at some point it's going to not be available anymore.
Right.
Or at least not easily available. And so I had to quick kind of just ram it through before they expired it. But yeah, exams, man, it's like it's like a necessary evil anymore, to just maintain your knowledge. Like I learn more just by studying for exams and taking exams than I do sometimes actually doing work.
Oh yeah, agreed. Yeah, because you're learning all the things that you don't have to concentrate on for a job.
Yeah.
You learn all the extraneous stuff, not extraneous, the things on the periphery that you don't run into on a daily basis, like fiber channel. Questions about fiber channel. I haven't seen fiber channel in 10 years. Hopefully I never will again. But it's one of those things.
Yeah. But Tony, you've got VCPs to renew coming up, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're looking at moving to the VCP-NV so that I can kind of do the VMware Education 2-for-1 deal.
No.
Get them both.
Yeah, and I have to. I did some more looking into mine. I have to renew mine just to maintain my partner status. So,
which one do you have to renew? All of them?
Just one. If I pass one, they all flip over. So
yeah.
So I'll probably
that
just
is the reason why I still take tests is so that I keep my APN status and keep our VMware partner status.
Yeah. I'm technically a registered AWS partner, but I don't actually do anything with them yet.
Haven't had a customer request it yet.
No, that's the real That's the real thing. As soon as somebody wants me to do it, I'll figure it out. But yeah. Okay. So next question I had on the list, Chris, what kind of company would you say is a good candidate to move workloads into AWS?
AWS or public cloud or?
I guess either or, but I guess I'm going to shoehorn you in as the AWS guy for this episode.
I will not be pigeonholed. The reason I'm asking is because I just finished doing a webinar with our partner, our Microsoft channel partner, AWS but AWS and Azure. What's the best pick for your company? And we literally spent an hour talking about going back and forth, talking about the pros and cons of one versus the other, and what to think about when you're considering a migration, or if you're starting a company from whole cloth. Where do you want to go? What do you want to do? I would argue that the right time to move to any public cloud, but AWS in specific, would be when you're just starting off. Like you're just creating a company. We'll call it a pizza pie restaurant making pizzas. You want
Sure.
to make pizzas. You want to have an online presence. you want to
maybe we'll call it Elastic Sky Pizza.
Yeah, something weird like that with no reference to anything. Hi, John. How are you doing out there? Hope he's listening. No. So anybody that doesn't want to invest in a ton of IT infrastructure on the front end, I mean, honestly, if I were starting a company today, I would not want to buy a single switch. I would not want to buy a single server. I'd want to get a cable modem for the office, and maybe a little switch port to like route everything around, whatever, you know what I mean.
I'd have to do fiber nowadays. It's just
Fiber channel?
No.
Oh, the pain. No, the only reason I said cable modem is because I have a brand new cable modem right next to me.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, I would want as little infrastructure as possible, and I'd want as little internal overhead as possible, because when you're first starting off in SMB, you have limited budget, limited timeframes, and normally the CEO is also the IT manager, is also the the Exchange admin, is also the this and the that. So there's never a bad time to start considering it, but a really good time to think about it is before you even get off the ground. Especially if you're not in the hardware business. If you're not building switches, then then you shouldn't be buying something else and then having to train yourself up on said switches.
So then, in that kind of respect, then, say if you are a startup company and you're looking into this stuff, what makes you want to choose one public platform over the other?
So that is a much more nuanced question. The answer is it depends. As any good architect will tell you, the answer is it depends. If you have a development platform, if you are a software developer who is writing stuff for Microsoft HoloLens, then the natural pick is Azure. Mm-hmm. If you are an Android developer writing something for Google Glass, then the natural pick is GCP. If you have a vanilla Linux environment that you need to stand up, and you don't have any like particular calls that you have to do into or anything that is like particularly cloud specific, and you have a need to ramp up to large amounts of hardware and then skinny down to small amounts of hardware, all at different times, then I mean, obviously the 800-pound gorilla is AWS. They have far more servers, they have far more availability zones, they have far more compute than the next 16 competitors combined. And that's not just me, saying a number. That's actually true. They have more compute and RAM in data centers than the next 16 competitors combined, including Azure and GCP and Rackspace and IBM Smart Cloud and everybody else. So if you potentially see yourself burning through a lot of compute, then they're the way to go.
Have you watched any of the distinguished engineer James Hamilton's presentations?
Where? What do you mean?
Okay, so if you then the answer is no.
Tell me more.
I gotta find one. You know him if you saw him.
Not the president.
Yeah. So here I'm gonna add this link into the notes.
Oh, the Tuesday night with James Hamilton.
Yeah.
So I was there for Tuesday night. I did not remember his name.
Okay. He's the crazy guy who looks like Christopher Lloyd.
Yes.
And he's just ridiculously smart, and I guess he's one of the chief engineers that built AWS. If anybody has never heard this guy give a talk on Amazon Web Services and how they build it, just go consume every talk on YouTube that he has done on AWS.
Yes,
it is phenomenal. I mean, I first stumbled across one of his talks that he gave in 2013, and I was listening to it in 2016, and everything he was talking about, that like he was kind of doing a little bit of forecasting and saying like, this is going to be a problem. This is going to be a problem. Network stuff is going to be a problem. Mm-hmm. And 3 years later, everything he was talking about back in 2013 was major problems, and they had already been working on these solutions for 3 years. And he was talking sort of more about how at that point AWS's infrastructure costs, for CPU were going down, data storage was going down. The only thing that was remaining flat across their entire company in terms of costs was the network costs. And so he was looking at this, and he's just like, the smart money says if everything else is going down, but this is staying the same, then it's actually going up.
Right. Yep. Makes sense.
And so he's like, so that prompted Amazon Web Services to then build basically their own software-driven networking stack. Mm-hmm. And that's what by the time they got that deployed in 2015, they were able to finally start to bring their cost down. Mm-hmm. And like, just he's a little bit hamstrung with what he can show for what hardware they actually do use, but it's really interesting and intriguing, some of the stuff he goes into. Probably one of the coolest stories he tells is he talks about the Amazon undersea fiber.
Oh yeah.
The dedicated undersea fiber between LA and Hawaii, and it goes all the way around the globe. Their own stuff, and he talks about how like you got to have these high voltage repeaters every few miles under the ocean. And so they're as they're building their own stuff, he's trying to explain how like, well, what if they have to run 20,000 volts over two lines, so they split 10,000 volts through these two lines. They're like, okay, well, what if we lose one? Then the whole thing's dead. So what they figured out is between the repeaters, they can cross over and run 20,000 volts on one line, and then use the ocean as the ground.
Wow.
Between that repeater, until they can get somebody down there to fix it.
Wow, that's amazing.
And I'm just like, I'm listening to them like, how do you even come up with that as a solution?
They hire a lot of very, very smart people. The guy that we had come out and talk, his name is Randall Hunt, and he spoke at my AWS Portsmouth user group, and he came down to the VTUG, the Virtualization Technology user group, that we host down in Gillette Stadium. And he is a very bright young man. He's literally a rocket scientist. He's a PhD in rocket science. He started off at NASA. He got bored at NASA and then went to SpaceX. He spent 7 years at SpaceX working with Elon, sending up rockets, got bored there, and is now, then he got bored there. He went to MongoDB. He was employee number 11 at MongoDB, started building databases, and then he left there, and now he's an evangelist at AWS and travels around the world and talks about cool stuff for AWS.
Wow.
He's one of the people that is going to Elon now. He's like going back to his roots at SpaceX and talking with him about setting up the areas and launch windows for getting things and people to Mars. So he showed us some graphs about like different launch windows and times and temperatures and where on the globe it needs to be and how long it would take to get from here to there using very, very advanced mathematics. So
Yeah. So I have one other James Hamilton story I have to share. This is the other crazy thing that just blows my mind. So if you remember a few Super Bowls ago, the Ravens and the 49ers and the blackout in the middle of the Super Bowl.
Right.
He explained what happened there, and I'd never heard anybody tell the story before. So apparently, somewhere in the stadium, and it was in New Orleans, right? I think. So somewhere in the stadium, there was a power failure in the building.
Mm-hmm.
And so the giant high voltage power switch gear has this, and all of the manufacturers that build these super high voltage switch gear units, they build in a safety mechanism so that when they fail, you can't turn them back on without going through a series of checks, and it takes 90 minutes to an hour to get that stuff figured out before you can turn it back on.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why it took them so long to get the power back on during the Super Bowl. So as Amazon Web Services is building out their data centers across the globe, they wanted to buy some high voltage switchgear naturally. And they go to all these manufacturers, and all of the manufacturers say, no, we have to build in this safety thing because it could kill people if something blows up. It could literally blows up. And so Amazon basically says, okay, well, fine. We'll just hire some engineers and we'll build our own high voltage switchgear without the safety valve.
Wow.
So are these like in areas where there are no people?
I don't know. But basically he's just like, yeah, like they're, and the point was, they would rather have other controls around loss of life than lose data.
Sure. As long as you don't lose either.
Well, exactly. But ultimately, like they and really all they wanted to do was like I think it was more along the lines of if they could identify the problem and know what it is, they don't want to have to be hamstrung to wait to flip the switch back on. They would rather just be able to fix it quickly and turn it back on as soon as possible than have to wait and go through all of this rigmarole.
Do you remember where he talked about that?
I think that was in the 2017 one, just the last one.
Okay.
Because it would have been after that. It was like a year or two after that Super Bowl. So
I'm gonna have to rewatch that.
Yeah, and it was fascinating. So I'm just like okay, like that's awesome and scary all at the same time.
Yeah, totally.
So, Chris, we already talked about some of this stuff, but just kind of at a high level, what would you say to someone who's looking to get into AWS and kind of some areas where should they start? You can get some of the high-level abstract. I don't want to make this a 3-hour episode, but high-level abstract of some of the...
Hold on, let me get my whiteboard going.
There you go.
Step one.
The basic level services and kind of quick overview.
So the very first thing, so AWS offers a 1-year free tier. So if you have an account and you have a credit card, and if you have an AWS account and a credit card, you can turn on a 12-month-long free trial of Amazon Web Services. Now, that doesn't mean that you can turn on everything. There are certain things that still do have charges. But in AWS, there are the EC2 instances are the VMs. So your VMs are your EC2 instances.
Okay.
They have different sizes of them. They have T2s, Ts, which are the micros. Like, so a T2 micro is the smallest instance that you can provision in AWS, and those are free in the 12-month free trial.
Okay.
If you go larger than that, like to the M's or the I's or the R's or the D's, then they cost more. And you can go like, M4 large, M4 extra large, M4 extra extra large. And there's as you're provisioning the boxes, a big drop down comes up and it shows you, the different sizes, and you can go into a calculator and calculate how much it's going to cost you to run each one of those things. But for the purposes of the 12-month free trial, you can turn on everything as a T2 micro. I mean, even Windows boxes, Windows 2012 on a T2 micro takes forever to turn on, but you can still play with it in your free tier, and you can play with your VPCs, you can play with your availability zones, all of the services.
What is a VPC?
A virtual private cloud. Sorry.
Okay.
I will refrain from using acronyms during the rest of the
Okay.
rest of the
That's
talk.
all right.
You can use them as long as you define them.
Yeah, exactly.
The virtual private cloud is your AWS data center.
Okay.
Inside of your VPC, you have different availability zones, which are AZs. And then in the AZs, you have multiple data centers. So there are regions in AWS. The US has 3 regions. It's got US East in the middle, and then US West. and there's a couple of breakouts too. There's GovCloud, and there's a couple of other ones as well. But for intents and purposes, a region is a slice of geography. And then within that region, you're going to have multiple availability zones. And each availability zone is its own distinct CIDR block inside of your VPC. So you can have multiple availability zones, each one of them running half of your workload. So you've got some of your workload running in one of AZ, and the other half of your workload running in another AZ, so that if you have a loss of functionality, you still have your environment running up, if you've designed your environment properly.
Okay.
That's always the caveat, isn't it?
That is always the caveat. You have to have a persistent back end with persistent front ends, so that you don't have to worry about any one thing dying. No SPOFs. Get a 12-month free trial. I would highly encourage anybody that's getting their feet wet into doing exactly what you guys did, getting an A Cloud Guru subscription, or just buying the 5-pack of the certifications or just, so there's the 3-pack certifications, the 5-pack, and the 8-pack, or you can do a yearly subscription and just all you can eat from an all-you-can-eat buffet. And then going through those, I did solutions architect first because that was the thing that I needed to pass. But you can do any of the 3, and each one will walk you through what the services do, and then get your feet wet and start dipping your toes into the different main services. So that would be my recommendation of somebody first now getting into it, where to go.
So with that 1-year free tier, is it you're just over, you're done, you don't get anything else at the free tier once that 12-month time period is up? Can you renew that if you're talking like NFR learning purposes? How does that work?
Once it is done, it is done.
Okay.
There are non-disclosed illegal ways of getting another new 12-month period that I highly frown upon and would dissuade anybody from doing while I'm being recorded.
Yes. We wouldn't want you to do that. So how would you say, I know there's been a lot of stuff in the press lately about people that have been leaving their S3 storage buckets not secured. So how do you secure AWS?
So AWS has a model what they call the shared security responsibility model. Did I say that right? I think that there's a very specific term for it.
If you said it, it's right.
The AWS shared responsibility model. Basically, what that means is that AWS takes care of all of the hardware for you. They have the data center built up. They have the man traps getting into the data center. They grind the disks after they're decommissioned so that nobody can get to the data. They wipe the data, the floor plan, and they keep all the data centers as black boxes from the outside so that nobody actually knows where they physically are located. However, if you have a web server on an EC2 instance, and on the main front page, you put the root username and password, and everybody can see it, and you leave SSH open to the world, that's not on them. So
security best practices apply here.
Security best practices apply here, but not only that, I would actually argue that AWS makes it easier for you to be secure because you have a smaller vector of attack to be concerned about. You don't have to worry about keeping the doors locked or making sure that the cleaning person at night doesn't trip over the power cable. That's what they worry about. That is their bailiwick. All you have to do is make sure that your code is tight, that your web server is only allowing port 80 and port 443 in, and that your web servers are actually in a private AZ, and that you're running an elastic load balancer in front of them, and that is taking care of the brunt of your DDoS attacks.
But none of that happens automatically. You got to set that stuff up.
That is absolutely correct. You have to design your environment, and that's where Chris Williams, Green Pages Enterprise Consultant, comes in and tells you how to.
Shameless plug.
Very, very shameless. We'll walk you through the process of how to do that, and how to migrate your applications up in a highly available environment, making sure that your data stays safe and secure and encrypted at all times.
So when it comes to availability zones and replicating between them and all that kind of stuff, is it really just a matter of turning it on somewhere in the console, or do you have to subscribe to another service within it, or how does that work versus using some other DR solution like VMware SRM or Veeam or Zerto or
So those are actually great questions.
And are you actually going to whiteboard this?
Yeah,
Nice.
I'm just going to do this just to make sure.
Live whiteboarding.
So here is your AWS region, and as we spoke before, a region we'll just call it, this is US East. Inside of this region, we have got our availability zones, and for this purpose, we're just going to have 2 AZs. This will be US East 1, and this will be US East 2. So right here, you've got your elastic load balancer sitting across zones, and it's basically feeding and connecting into a private subnet, and inside your subnet, you've got web server 1, and you've got web server 2. And basically the ELB is talking to these guys, and the only thing that sees the internet is this guy right here, is your ELB. So your DNS entry is actually front-ended on your ELB, and web server 1 and web server 2 just have internal 10 dots.
Okay.
So these guys now are attached to an EFS server on the back end. This EFS server is your only source of persistent storage. The EFS server is not in an availability zone either. It is a service, and it is triple replicated across different sets of environments. And when these guys spin up, then they're mounted to the EFS server. This guy has its own HA built into it via the multi-rights, and these guys are fully destructible.
Okay.
So you back up your EFS environment using whatever format you want to use, Veeam or whatever like that. And these guys, what you can do with these guys is you can front end them with autoscale groups, ASGs. And you can set up a rule in your ELB tying to the autoscale groups that says that whenever this web server spikes to like 80% CPU or 50% RAM or whatever like that, spawn another web server and another web server and another web server on both sides, and then load balance across all of those guys. And basically what all of these do is they continue writing to the same EFS mount. So your persistent storage and your fully destructible front end take care of your HA.
Okay.
Your DR strategy is having a Veeam server on another availability zone. So say you got Veeam over here, and it is just tying in and doing backups of your environment, which is actually really backing up your EFS partition. So you're telling it to back up a mount, and that mount is actually your EFS. Wow. So that takes care of your DR. This takes care of your HA and also your BC.
Nice.
How long would you say to get somebody stood up with that? Does it take on just a not necessarily a simple configuration, but a medium-sized build?
So the beauty of AWS is that they have this thing called infrastructure as code. I think you've heard of it.
Mm-hmm.
We've been talking about that for several years now. Infrastructure as code basically states that any type of environment, this entire environment, honestly, this entire environment right here can be built up in less than half an hour.
Oh my gosh.
Wow.
So they have these things called CloudFormation templates, and if you plug the right information into a CloudFormation template, it'll spin up your Elastic Load Balancer, multiple AZs with your CIDR blocks pinned for both sides of it, your EFS. You set up some shell scripts, and it'll mount your EFS after it creates it. Your web servers will mount to it. Then you pip yum install Nginx on it, Apache on it, and then you run a couple of other scripts to dump information from an S3 bucket over here. So say you've got your S3 bucket, and inside of it you've got a golden image, or not a golden image, but like just a file of all of your www files. You just do your initial copy there, and then all of your persistent data is stored on your EFS. If you script all of that and then stand it up without the installation of the Veeam and so I don't have a lot of experience with installing Veeam, but I'm sure that you can script the install. So this part, without talking about Veeam, is about 15 to 25 minutes, and Veeam is however long that would take.
Can you do it without the Veeam piece, or is that?
Oh yeah. So there's if you Google AWS Quick Starts.
Okay.
Doing it now.
You'll see that there's a whole bunch of. If you scroll down, you'll see Chef environment, Puppet environment, Ansible environment. Click on the view guide for Chef Automate. You see that little button that says Launch Quick Start?
Yeah, blue button.
If you hit that button, it spins up a fully functional Chef environment for you in less than 15 minutes.
Oh my god,
that is incredible.
Following following good principles of having elastically scaled environments, ELBs. Oh, shush. Oh, Alexa piped up.
Nice.
At least he wasn't laughing at you.
That's true. That's true. So if you go through those quick starts, there's a whole bunch of them in there just for just automatically setting up your environment. The most generic one in there is under networking and access, and it's called the scalable VPC. If you fire that one up, it'll ask you. It turns on a scalable environment for you, with elastic load balancers and all the goodies.
Can you do any of this with the free tier or no?
You can. You just have to make sure that as you go through and select your instance types, that you only choose T2 micros.
You know, part of me always wants to hate AWS for some reason. as a traditional IT person,
the giant monolith.
But this is just like they keep doing this stuff where they're just like, "Oh yeah, you can do that, right? Here's blah blah blah," and it's done. It's just like, come on. Do you have any idea how long this used to take?
Yeah, with physical even go back to like before virtualization. You'd have all this physical hardware, all this network interconnect, and this architecture and design. That's crazy.
You know, part of me always wants to be the tech curmudgeon like John C. Dvorak, but I'm just.
Yep. No. I get it. Here, let me share my screen with you. This is the CloudFormation template for standing up a fully functional Magento interface. Magento is an e-commerce solution. It's a community edition, so it's free to the internet. In fact, the template is in that list. If you look at the Magento thing, you'll see all of this. And it asks you all the questions about the database, about what your passwords you want, what your CIDR blocks want to be. It uses regex patterns to make sure that you're not putting in the wrong type of information, and then it fires it up. And then it actually so it's a little bit of object oriented. It references other install guides, and it references other CloudFormation templates in there, and then it fires those guys up too. So this fires up your VPC stack, this fires up your Bastion host for your front-end Linux Bastion, and this fires up the Magento stack, and then this Magento stack fires up all of these other templates over here.
Wow.
So CloudFormation is infrastructure as a service, and all of those launch buttons that you see all utilize CloudFormation templates to fire them up. You can download those templates, modify them to suit your purposes, and have it fire up whatever you want it to fire up.
Unbelievable.
Isn't it great?
That's great. Yeah.
It's
Britton, we really need to dive back into this again and stop putting it off.
I know, but it's this is the frustrating part of this. Is like there's too much. It's just too much. I mean, this is the problem. As this stuff becomes, bigger and bigger and better and better, like you can't learn it all, and you have to just pick your field and stick with it, because you're just going to get lost otherwise. Like, I grew up in this industry as an IT generalist, and you almost can't do that anymore. Like having a little bit of knowledge of everything, but it's really hard to do that and be successful in a career anymore.
So I think that a lot of, that's me in a nutshell too. I am an IT generalist, and that's how when I started off in networking many moons ago, and then I got into the operating system, and then I did a stint as a SQL guy, and then I did a stint as a storage guy, and then I did a stint, then I got into virtualization, and I became the VMware guy. Yeah. So I had the 4 food groups of CPU, RAM, disk, and networking, and then learning how to take the 4 food groups and bend them to my will in all of the different ways. Being a generalist actually helps out a lot with this. The only piece that I did not have is I still don't have this. I still don't have a good knowledge of coding. I'm not a coder. I'm furiously learning quickly I'm trying to learn quickly and spinning up on Python and JSON and things like that.
Would you call that coding though, or is that just scripting? I mean, I would think that hardcore coders would say that's not the
I don't care. I need to know enough to be able to read that template that I just showed you and be able to modify it to my needs. I'm not going to ever be like a data scientist or like I don't have a CS degree, and I'm not going to get into like heated religious arguments about tabs versus spaces. That's not me. But I that distinction doesn't mean anything to me. I just need to know enough to stay dangerous.
And I've never, like, I at one time in my career tried to learn a little bit of HTML and JavaScript, and I realized that I didn't have the head for it then, and I certainly don't now. And I just, to me, it seems like if you're a coder, it's like an art form, because you have
it totally is.
You have to be like super organized in your thinking, because if you screw up one little thing at the beginning, everything else at the end is broken. And like, people who code and know how to code, like I would say they're literally born coders in a way. Like you can learn the technical pieces of it, but to be really, really, really good at it, it's not something I don't think. I think it's like people who like can just sit down and play the piano. I mean, not everybody can do that.
Right, but how many people are really, really, really good at coding? And how many coders are there that are actually out there?
Well, that's why we have jobs too.
I mean, your level of what's a really good coder. I mean, I agree. So I agree with you 100% on your statement. B, there's a lot of really nasty code out there.
Yeah.
So there's tons of people making a very good living at coding that don't meet your standard.
I understand. I'm not saying that they're bad people.
and they're horrible people. They don't call their mother on Sundays.
Yeah.
They don't give to the poor.
I just am saying, like, there's this big push in school systems nowadays to teach little kids how to code. And like a lot of these kids, probably are not going to grow up to be coders. I mean,
Sure.
I don't think that, coding is the next generation of blue collar work. I think blue collar work is the next generation of blue collar work.
Unless Flippy the Burger Flipper gets his stuff together, then we're all host.
Yeah, well, and then I keep waiting for automation to come to my local McDonald's, but
yeah, no, and so I'm not reinventing my career path this late in the game. What I'm doing is I'm getting good enough to contribute to GitHub. I'm getting good enough to use VS Code and understand what a plugin means, just enough so that I can write stuff to automate the things that are now automatable. And so I still need all the previous arsenal of weapons that I had on how to talk to customers, how to pull requirements, how to gather all the things. It's just taking the same 4 food groups and bending them to our will in a completely different way.
Yeah.
Now using words instead of wires.
Yeah, and that way it is smart. I mean, I know it's not for me because I just don't have the head and time for it. I would love to be able to sit down and tell, Alexa how to do something and in code and make it, work. It's just, I need help. That's really what it comes down to.
We all do.
Yeah, honestly, I think that a lot of it is just exposure and repetition. I mean, learning a new skill is just like learning a new language. If you do a little bit, 15 minutes, half an hour every day, you start picking up things. I'm an awful coder. Coding to me is like learning a brand new language, and I'm still using wooden blocks to try to make cat. I mean, that's where I'm at, and I'm awful. I'm awful at it. I look at my code every day and I'm like, oh, this is awful. But I'm forcing myself to do it because that's the new normal now. This is the new. I mean, we still have a long way to go in terms of we still have data centers, and we're not getting rid of data centers anytime soon. And I'm still going to be going into places and racking and stacking boxes too, even though I don't want to. But eventually this whole public cloud thing might catch on, and we're not going to have to walk into data centers anymore.
And if I recall, I think in the last VMworld, Pat Gelsinger gave some statistics about public cloud versus private cloud adoption rates and how it's slowly creeping towards 50%.
Right.
And like when I looked at the numbers, the thing that kind of stuck out to me is I'm just like, it seems to me like we're, before the public cloud adoption rates get more than private cloud adoption rates, we're really just waiting for a bunch of these old dyed-in-the-wool guys to retire.
Yeah, that's not fair either, though.
And then we'll get there.
We're just waiting for them to die. So
no. Because I mean, if there's guys who are 5 years out or 10 years out and they're done, I mean, a lot can happen in 5 and 10 years. So maybe things could get even cheaper to run in public, and I think the biggest barrier to entry for people jumping into public clouds is purely access to fiber to their offices.
Access to public is access to public is restricted by access to fiber?
Yeah, because I think if people don't have, like I have plenty of customers today that don't have fiber optic internet available to their business yet.
And why does that stop them from thinking about public?
Because if they have on-premise, if they, say it's a hotel or something where they need on-premise infrastructure to connect to that public stuff, and it has to be reliable and fast.
Yep.
You're not going to trust a cable internet connection. I mean, and you don't want to go back to a bunch of bundle of T1 lines.
Right.
I see.
You need that 500 megabit up and down connection to make it really work.
That makes sense.
And for a lot of, especially on the small business end of things, like, they're okay spending 10, 20 grand on some servers in house versus spending $3,000 a month for an ISP bill. So that to me is from what I see in my customers' worlds That's what's keeping them from jumping with both feet into this. Is strictly it's a bandwidth limitation, and that just might be a Midwestern thing, because in Wisconsin we don't have ubiquitous fiber everywhere. We have a lot of there's been a lot of telecom fights happening here in the state capital of Madison just in the last 2 years, where the primary carriers are kicking other carriers out, and it's just they're not getting along.
The Wisconsin carrier wars of 2018.
Pretty much, yeah.
Like Mad Max in the streets. It's crazy out there.
Yeah, and so it's spurning where the other local carriers are coming in now. They're building their own fiber networks in town.
Nice.
And so it's making good things happen, but it's going to be another 3-5 years before we have more options.
And that's why that goes back to the old architectural trope of it depends. I mean, region, use case, appetite, current existing infrastructure, if that existing infrastructure even exists or not. I mean, every single company's use case is its own snowflake. I hate to say it, but I mean, it really is.
Yeah, totally.
Everybody wants it to be like a cookie cutter response, but it never is.
So talk to me, Chris, about VMware on AWS.
Yes.
As a small business guy, I was really hoping that they would lead with the solution they led with and an essentials version for small businesses. But they obviously didn't do that.
I have opinions.
Tell me, because when you look at the initial bill for this thing, I mean, it's a lot of money, and if there was a way for them to do this, and do it in an essentials kind of fashion, where the smallest level of VMware you can get is VMware Essentials or Essentials Plus. It's like $500, for the license. And
I'm gonna do my scary story thing here, and then the first, and then you get the first bill. Ooh.
Yeah.
VMware and AWS, they really have to think. I mean, a $250,000 just to get in the door.
Yeah.
And that's if you pay it all up front. That is a hefty pill to swallow.
Yeah, that's more than the IT and staff budget for some of my customers.
Yep. and that's something that I have talked to the guys over at VMware. I've talked to them about that. I've talked to the guys. I mean, and when I say talk to the guys, I mean the people, like the technical marketing guys that are running vSphere on AWS, both in the VMware side and the AWS side. And I'm like, are you guys going to make this palatable, easy to swallow and or digest? And they're starting to come up with some new financial incentives. Doing month-to-month billing. But like basically doing a reserved instance, but charging by the month instead of paying it all up front. They're trying to make that bill better to swallow. But just to get in the door, I mean, we're talking. So to get in the door, you have to have 4 hosts. You have to have 3 hosts plus a 4th quorum host in case of failure, and it's $250,000 for 4 servers.
Yeah,
for a year.
For a year. Yeah.
For a year.
There is a 3-year discount.
That you can buy a lot of servers with $250,000. So I think that it is a phenomenal play for a very select number of people out there.
Well, I mean, if you're if you're the Morgan Stanleys of the world, or Boeing, or GE,
and they're all looking at it.
Or Universal Studios, or I mean, some massive.
And their first question is, how big can I go? Oh, 32 hosts? Oh, that's all? We can't go any bigger?
Yeah, exactly. For them, it's a no-brainer, but
that might run my management network.
Yeah, honestly, a lot of customers that size, what they're doing is they're actually looking to decommission their DR sites and using this as a fast move into public cloud. So every CTO and CIO out there, they're like, oh, I want to put, move company X to the public cloud on my resume. So they're pushing hard for that. So DR to the cloud is an easy win. Moving your entire DR data center, which is all virtualized anyway, up to the cloud without changing an IP address, basically setting up a transport zone using NSX across the way, having both sides set up, and then shoving everything over, not changing a single IP address. That's easy peasy. That's a fast it's not a cheap victory, but it's a fast victory, and so that is the use case that I see it being run in. I don't see a lot of appetite or energy in the SMB market for it right now.
Yeah, I mean, and that's why I, jumped whole hog on the OVH's stuff, because, they make it a little bit more palatable. And
yes.
I mean, I just stood up a customer week on it.
I mean, they had to. They didn't have a choice. I mean, they were going to get their lunches eaten by vSphere on AWS.
Yeah. And
I still have my vCloud Air T-shirt.
I have a vCloud Air glass that they sent me when I did my vExpert trial of it. It's a limited edition item now.
Nice. I have the it's the Dilbert cartoon, and on the back it says vCloud Air. It's the Dilbert cartoon where the pointy-haired boss is asking Dilbert about if I point my thing to the cloud, will it work? And I have that frame next to my Napster T-shirt now, and I just shed a tear every now and then when I walk past it. That's not true at all. That's a lie.
Well, I'm glad you more or less agree with me, because it's like. It was kind of the one thing that I was really looking forward to last year's VMworld, and to see more about it. And I just kind of came away just like, you guys, like every single, and this is part of the reason Tony and I wanted to do this podcast too, is to just help out the small guys who don't have access to a lot of information, and
and they don't have huge budgets.
We don't have big budgets.
Right.
We want to get this stuff. We like the cool stuff. We like the flashy lights, but it's just
I mean, to be perfectly honest, it is a slick solution. It answers it checks all the boxes. I mean, you now have your VMDK in AWS, and you can actually use all of the AWS services on your VMDK. If you run out of disk space in your vSphere and AWS environment, you can attach Elastic Block Storage directly to your VMDKs now. Wow. So it's crazy pimp. It's really, I mean, it's amazing what the things that you can do with it, but it's gonna, I mean, unless you get like a bunch of small customers together and pool their money together to like buy a couple boxes.
Hey, you get a host, I get a host.
Right.
Well, I think it's cool that they have the integrated NSX and vSAN. I think the fact that VMware manages the entire stack for you and does your upgrades, everything's transparent. I think that's really cool, and you could still have hands-on in terms of vSphere. I think it's awesome, but like we've already talked about, beat that dead horse. It's just too expensive right now. They're going to have something.
Yeah, I think the price will drop eventually. It's just not right now.
Yeah, well, and it is hard because they've only got it in 2 data centers now. Yeah,
it's in US East and London right now.
Yeah. So I mean, and that's sort of the once they can get beyond Oregon and get over on the East Coast somewhere, that things will start to spread more, I'm sure. But I don't know. I mean, with all of this potential merger one way or the other with Dell, I mean, I feel like there's a fly in the ointment there too, potentially, with what happens.
We are covering all the bases today. All the speculations coming out.
Hey, man, we got to talk about something fun.
Well, welcome to the Gigacast. No holds barred.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's why the 2 people who listen like us.
Hi, Steve. Hey, Mark. Wait, who? Oh, hey, Al.
Yeah, shout out to Al.
Yes. Shout out to Al. Woo!
Thanks for listening, Al.
And Al, as soon as you hear this, I want you to tweet about it.
Exactly.
You will.
You got a shout out.
All right.
We do that be round back too. Hey, Al.
Hey, we have somebody else that's listening a lot now too. Tony Gonzalez from Colorado area.
Oh,
So
yeah.
shout out to him too.
So Chris, what would you say is the one question, maybe two questions, that customers come to you and they don't ask but they should ask when it comes to
Ooh,
public cloud or AWS or anything like this?
that they don't ask, but that they should ask.
I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but
No. That's a great question. What other than the cost of the EC2 instances and the disks, what other costs are involved in moving to public cloud? What other? I mean, not so much the soft costs, but the costs of the other services that I might be consuming, because what a lot of people don't know is that you can transfer data in for free, but data coming out is what costs money.
Yeah.
So you have to have a better than average idea of your own traffic flow, to get a good idea of the cost of things and the cost of running a website. If you have a website with a whole bunch of little files, that's going to cost less than a website with a whole bunch of big files. Like if you're downloading a bunch of stuff, or if you're a provider, then that's going to cost more. And let's see, what's another good question?
Billing alerts.
Yeah, actually, that's a great point.
Brian Krausen just posted an article on setting up detailed billing alerts.
Yep, how to set up billing alerts, and how to set up your budget in your environment. What is it that you expect it to burn, and how to set up alerts on what happens when it totally blows that out of the water.
Yeah. And I think with that, it's more a matter of when it happens.
Yeah.
Because
unless
you're a pretty static business, you're gonna hit that pretty quickly.
It's and that's also dependent upon how you provision your boxes. So there's this thing called IOPS provisioning in your disks, and you can provision like a reserved amount of IOPS that guarantees flow through on your EBS instances, and you can dial that up to like 30,000, I think, is the top. That costs an arm and a leg, even if you're not actually using it. Simply reserving the space causes your meter to burn a lot faster than if you had not set it at all, or if you had set it at a lower moderate setting. And the only reason that I know that is because one of our customers was like, "Oh, I got this massive backend database. It needs tons of disk. It needs all the things. Give it all the things." So when I attached EBS volumes to it, I set it up for the max amount of IOPS reserved, and it started like burning $3,000 a week. So it's like, I don't need that much. You can dial that back, Chris. All right.
So is that sort of the hedge against the noisy neighbors syndrome?
It is.
Where you can reserve that stuff?
Yeah, it's basically an elastic block storage is a network attached device to your server, and by guaranteeing the IOPS throughput to it, you're basically QoSing your drive into your EC2 instance. That QoS costs a premium. And honestly, the guy didn't need that at all. I mean, when we finally actually looked at the real numbers after we dialed it all down to zero, and saw the throughput, it was all RAM. The actual need was RAM on the box. So we put a Redis cache in front of it, and that actually gave him far better performance than all this provisioned backend disk stuff.
I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I would say the majority, or maybe correct me if you have a different experience, but the majority of stuff that I've seen in vSphere environments specifically is majority of the time virtual machines are over provisioned anyways.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So when you go from provisioning, if you're a traditional IT vSphere guy and you're provisioning machines in a cloud service, how do you figure out what you really need when you're provisioning these things? Because now you have to really pay attention to what building and what it needs.
Always give what the vendor says they need. Always.
Yes.
Because all of a sudden,
vendor answer right there. Wow.
All of a sudden, as an IT person, you're not just an IT person. You're kind of a bean counter.
Yep.
Yeah.
Totally.
And I'm sure there are now full-time positions where it's somebody watching the meter.
I actually have two great answers for that. So if you are running a VMware environment, then VROPS is the thing to use.
Mm-hmm.
I spent 2 years at Kronos in their private cloud division, standing up and testing different monitoring and metric tools, and VROPS plus along with vRealize for Business is a phenomenal tool for actually looking at a box and seeing what it's actually using. If you have an existing VMware environment and you are thinking about moving it to the public cloud, in my dream scenario, you would stand up VROPS in the environment, let it burn for like 3 months, get a really fine-tuned look at exactly what your boxes actually genuinely need in your current environment, and then when you're moving them up, you're not doing a lift and shift, you're resizing them as you move them up.
Okay.
The other tool that if you wanted to move things from a cloud to a cloud would be Cloud Checker. Cloud Checker is effectively VROPS on AWS. So you can use Cloud Checker on your AWS environment, and that will tell you, okay, you've got an M4 large here, but actually all you need is just a vanilla M4 because you're not burning anywhere near as much RAM or disk as you thought you were going to use. So you might as well just resize the sucker.
That's cool.
So when you're resizing, just kind of to wrap the stuff up here with their AWS, is it something where you have to completely reprovision a box, or can you like step it down without actually, deleting stuff and starting over?
I have written 2 fantastic articles on exactly how to do that, both in an HA environment with 0 downtime, and so the short answer is you have to turn the box off, right-click on it, choose resize, and select the new size that you want.
All right, I'll add that to the notes.
Straightforward.
Yeah, no, it's so I wrote an article. If you have a multi-AZ RDS environment, RDS is their database offering. You can, if you have a multi-AZ environment, you can actually resize your entire environment with 0 downtime. If you have a single instance, you have to turn that instance off. Then you can resize it and then bring it back up again.
Okay.
And it's pretty easy. Each one of those takes 5 minutes.
Wow.
Yay, AWS.
my head hurts a little from all of this, but it's a good hurt.
Each one of these topics is literally like a 3-hour discussion.
So I've got a question out of left field from the audience, and I'll give you one guess who this came from.
Hi, Al.
Not Al. The message says you have to ask him to expand on how Japanese culture has influenced his views on life and how it applies to work, general IT. Come on, who is that?
Hey, Ariel, how are you doing?
Ariel Sanchez reached out on Twitter, told me to ask you that.
So me and Mr. Sanchez have we both have a mutual love affair of. I was actually born in Japan,
cool.
So I have he and I both have a love affair of all things Japanese.
Yeah, I've seen you guys go back and forth on anime and other things.
Anime, sushi, Studio Ghibli. I mean, we go all over the place. I don't have an answer for that. I have no idea. It is culturally ingrained into my being, so I can't remove myself from myself to give an honest, valid answer of that.
Oh, he's going to be so disappointed. He even gave a Dory gift to say, I'll be tuning in for that awesome answer, Chris. So,
okay. All right. Well.
So we now have Ariel is going to view our podcast. So
that's 3.
That's a win. We're up 3 views.
I would say that so I did a bit of martial arts when I was over there. So I would have to say that my stick-to-itiveness and self control or lack thereof has been influenced by my Japanese martial arts and Japanese culture. Oh, that's a weak answer. That is such
Kung Fu is strong with this one.
That is such weak sauce. Wow, you've even got the lip syncing going on. Perfect. timing was a bit off.
I think
Just like
still
the old overdubs.
the best lip sync overdub movie of all time has got to be Kung Pao Enter the Fist.
Dude, I love that. That is like one of my guilty pleasures is watching that movie.
If you ever watched it with the actual words of what they're saying?
No.
Yeah, if you get the DVD, you can change the audio track to the actual what they're saying. And basically, the whole time, the whole movie, they're not even speaking actual lines. They're just saying like chicken, robot, standard, blah blah. They're just random words over and over and over again. That's all they're doing.
Nice.
Is it on Netflix right now? Please tell me it is.
All right, so we now know that Cody D. Arkland's favorite movie is The Other Guys with Mark Wahlberg.
Yes, and I got a chance to watch that now.
So, and we now know that one of Chris Williams' favorite movies is Kung Pao Enter the Fist. So.
We're multifaceted here.
And there we have it. Thank you very much.
Thank you for this episode of the Gigacast.
And we're out. Mic drop.
Chris, this has been insightful and entertaining, and
it has.
It's hurt my head.
My brain literally does hurt just a little bit, and it's like I said, it's a good hurt. It's this kind of. I mean, this is like part of the reason I want another selfish reason I wanted to do a podcast was so that I could get some free training from people like yourself. So thank you for that.
Oh, you're absolutely welcome. I mean, I love talking about tech.
And it's this kind of stuff like I always feel like I'm just a little fish in a sea of big fish, especially when I come across people like yourself who are so smart. So thank you for sharing what you can with me.
We appreciate it.
This is an honor for me to be on here. Thank you for having me on, and we all feel like that. That's everybody feels
it's true.
Like a little fish. I'm being perfectly honest. I'm nothing. I really am not.
I don't mean to blow you up and make your head bigger than it needs to be, but
if you see my wife was laughing hysterically last night
at the legend comment.
Oh yes. I showed her that, and she literally pointing and laughing. Just sitting there pointing and laughing at me. I was like, "What?
Hey, that means you have a healthy relationship, so that's good." If you can point and laugh at your spouse, and you can take it, that's good.
Oh yeah. I get it a lot. It's deserved. It is all well deserved, though. So
cool. Well, I'm sure that I will invite you back again at some point.
Love to be on.
This is another good question I want to ask you. Who else do you think we should talk to?
Yeah, there we go.
You know what? I think that anybody from the V Brown Bag crew would love to come on here. I mean, they get such a large swath of people in the chair that when we're doing the hosting, we absorb a load of information. I mean, anybody like Ariel or Tom Green or.
All right, I'm tweeting to him that you just volunteered Ariel to be a guest.
I voluntold him.
You voluntold.
Yeah. He would love to do this. He's fantastic.
Do you think Rebecca Fitzhugh would do it? Because I need to learn more about Rubric.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, I am not going to speak for Rebecca Fitzhugh by any stretch of the imagination. But I think that not having to fly someplace to do a talk like this would pique her interest.
All right. Well, I have an email. I have her email address, thankfully, so I will reach out at some point here because these backup as a service type companies like Rubric and Cohesity, they intrigue and boggle my mind all at the same time, kind of like this other cloud stuff.
Yep.
So it's something that with how popular backup and disaster recovery as a topic is, it's something we all need to keep abreast of and learn more about. So
you should also hit up Yadin over at Druva. He's really fun.
Oh yeah, I bet he'd love to do that.
Yeah, he's
I was
fun.
I was shocked. I was shocked to find out he is just now, as of Friday, the expert with all he does in the community. It's the first time he applied. I was like, what? How are you not in here already?
I thought the same thing.
Cool. Well, I'm going to wrap us up. Tony, do you have anything else?
Oh, I think that's about it. Thanks for coming on the show and blowing our minds with AWS. That's some pretty cool stuff.
This has been a lot of fun. So, all right. Give me 1, 2 seconds. I will play us out and we'll wrap it up offline. This has been Gigacast episode 12 for March 11th, 2018. You can find myself, Britton Johnson, on Twitter at VCIXNV. Tony Reeves is at Import Car Guy. The illustrious Chris Williams is at Mistwire. Check out his blog. It's got a lot of good stuff. Thanks again to Chris, and we will talk at you the next time we do one, which probably is going to be in April with our very special guest, Sir Jason McCarty. Talk to you then.